Americans love thrifting. It's affordable, eco-friendly, and a lot of fun. You never know what you'll find. Plus, many thrift stores support local charities, making it feel good to do good. Clearly, saving money is the number one appeal for secondhand shopping. According to Capital One Shopping, the average thrift store shopper saves $1,760 per year. Hi there, I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, a contributing editor at checkbook.org.
Welcome to Consumerpedia at checkbook.org. We're the nonprofit that helps consumers select services, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on checkbook.org to be completely independent and objective. Now, here's the host of Consumerpedia, America's consumer expert, the Consumer Man, Herb Weisbaum.
Thrifting is big business. In 2023, the secondhand market in the U.S. generated an estimated $53 billion, according to Capital One Shopping. It's estimated to hit $59 billion this year. In this episode, advice and some wonderful stories from two veteran thrift store shoppers, plus tips on buying pre-owned furniture, clothing, and antiques. Let's say hello to Jen Barger. She's Director of Content here at Checkbook.
Hi, Herb. How are you?
And Virginia Shamley is author of The Big Thrift Energy. Her popular newsletter is called What's Left? Hello, Virginia.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So since you're the guest, I'm going to start with you. I understand you've been shopping at thrift stores for a long time. How did it all start and when?
Well, it started really in the 90s for me, I guess. I was raised by my grandmother from the time I was 2 months old, and she was a single mom, and I was an only child, so we were thick as thieves, and she would drag me kicking and screaming to estate sales and thrift stores and plucking pieces out of a neighbor's dumpster. Really anything she could get her hands on. She loved hunting for treasure, and she took me with her. And she actually started a business buying and selling whole containers of furniture when I was very young. And she would sell out of these containers. And the containers were new, but she was selling so many of them that she decided to turn it into a store. And to supplement the new big pieces of furniture, she would buy smaller accessories at thrift stores and estate sales. So she started sort of flipping things when I was pretty young. And then when I got old enough to get my own apartment and later my first home, that's the first place I went to find all of the goodies to style in my home, is the thrift store.
And now you do it for a living.
I do. Yeah, I started by selling my finds, and I was selling to some pretty big name people, designers and celebrities and things like that. And then I would share on Instagram what I found and why I bought it. And then I got a book deal. And so I wrote a book, Big Thrift Energy, all about how to shop a thrift store and an estate sale and an auction. And then that sort of turned into a newsletter, and I write about it twice a week. And I also travel all over North America teaching people how to shop at thrift stores.
And now you're on the Consumerpedia podcast. Look what happened.
Exactly. Living the dream.
Hey, Jen, you're always on the lookout for bargains. What do you gravitate to when you go thrifting?
I don't think I've been thrifting quite as long as Virginia, but I have probably been since the mid-90s. I'm a big vintage fan, but I occasionally also look for lamps or art, or I even got one of my favorite chairs that's in my current house for $7 at a thrift store. So that's me.
Do you brag about that when someone comes over to you, say, look at this beautiful chair. I got it for just $7.
Well, I totally do, because my husband called it I'm trying to think of a good euphemism. He called it the poop chair because it looked like something had died in it. And it's one of those barrel chairs kind of from the 60s. And it had very flashy orange upholstery that was completely, let's just say, befouled by something. But I kept it. And then eventually I recovered it. And an interior designer friend of mine was like, that chair is so beautiful. And I was like, let me tell you about that chair.
Oh, that's a great story. Virginia, you make a living going thrifting. You buy and resell furniture and accessories that you find. What is the most expensive or unique thing you've ever bought and sold? Or give us a couple.
Well, the most valuable piece I've ever found, I still haven't sold. That is a Goyard trunk, which I got at sort of a little mom and pop thrift store, i.e. not a big chain, not like a Goodwill or a Salvation Army. And that was about 7 years ago. And I walked in the thrift store and I didn't see anything in the store, but the shopkeeper said, make sure you check out the shed out back. And I walked in and I saw this trunk. and it's covered in the logo of the brand. So I knew immediately what it was or what I thought it was, but the tag just said old trunk, $95. And I knew that this trunk was very valuable if it was indeed Goyard. So I threw that baby in my trunk faster than you can Google Goyard, got it home, and I found someone who specializes in appraising Louis Vuitton and Goyard trunks. And it is indeed the real deal. And I was offered over $30,000 for it.
Whoa.
From someone on Instagram. So that's my biggest find. I joke that I'll be the old woman who lived in her trunk one day. If everything goes bad, that'll be my one asset. I also have a really, really strange piece of art that I got at a Habitat for Humanity thrift store. And it was so sort of wacky that I had to bring it home. It shows stockbrokers sort of jumping off buildings and things. And, it makes a social commentary. But I discovered years later, because this was, I think, before Google Images and reverse Google image search was a thing. Mm-hmm. I happened to look it up and I realized that the artist, Warrington Colescott, he's made like 30 of these pieces. I have the artist proof, and one of them is at the Smithsonian.
Wow.
So that was another really good one that I still have. I've found a great set of brass Italian Mastercraft chairs that I got for $100 at a Salvation Army, and I sold those for several thousand. So that was obviously a great return on that investment. They sold rather quickly. And sometimes you have to sit on the furniture for a while because that's not always, an impulse purchase for people. Yeah. So it's always good if you can find something really, really rare. These chairs specifically were entirely made of brass. So that's obviously very unique. There was no wood or upholstery. It was just, pure brass.
Wow. Sounds amazing. Jen, shopping at a thrift store means buying someone else's stuff, and some people will never be comfortable buying secondhand items. Others have no problem with it and see thrifting as a way to get more for their money. What would you tell people who are hesitant to do this?
You can always put it in the wash. There are certain garments that you can't throw in a washing machine, but you can always take it to the dry cleaner. It's funny because I think some people are a little bit ooged out by used shoes. So I guess I see that. But I just think younger generations in particular, there are all these studies about Gen Z and all this anecdotal evidence that people don't care as much anymore. And particularly if what you're thrifting is something that maybe you wouldn't have been able to afford or would be more expensive, maybe you're willing to overlook a footmark in your slightly used Birkenstock. So I think people just should get over it.
I agree. I stay at hotels a lot, and I'm sleeping in the sheets and the comforter that presumably hundreds of other people have slept in. And I'm sitting in a chair that many other people have sat in. So to me, it's not that different. I definitely get a lot of questions whenever I find something upholstered, like, don't you find that smells? Aren't you worried about bed bugs? And of course, these things are maybe concerns, but you can clean anything. There are so many tips, from using mayonnaise to clean the stains off of wood, or, using vinegar to neutralize odors. So yeah, I completely agree. I'm not weirded out by it. If someone else is, I will take what they don't want.
Right. And then sell it for more money.
Exactly.
When it comes to interior design, vintage furniture and accessories are really in right now. Is that another reason that thrift stores are becoming so popular? Jen?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because what you need to make your house look interesting is to have things that have more color and more life than that. And where are you going to get that? You're probably going to get that at a thrift store or a vintage store. So I definitely think that, especially in an era when things are so bland and often badly made, and the things that you get at a thrift store, if they're older and well made, can be a lot nicer.
A lot of people may not realize what you can find, and some super buys. For instance, I was in a Goodwill store a number of years ago and found an entire set of Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books, absolutely perfect condition, brand new board games, some household stuff that had never even been taken out of the package, or a lot of them must have been donated by the manufacturer. Virginia, is that common?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, a lot of manufacturers now will have deals with thrift stores where they will donate their unsold merchandise. I've noticed in the Northeast Florida area, there are even some boutiques, some really nice boutiques that do this. So you'll go into a thrift store and you'll see a lot of tags from one particular store, and that's because they've donated all their unsold merchandise. Similarly, estate sales, you can find really incredible things because often those are pieces that have been sort of in the same family for generations or for at least several decades. So yeah, I think there's this notion, or there was for a long time, that thrift stores are kind of full of musty old junk, but there's actually just a ton of really nice brand new stuff there too.
Jen, a definition. If you're thrifting, are you going to antique stores as well, or are they not in the mix?
I think it really depends. It's not like there's a regulator out there saying this store will be a thrift store, this store will be a vintage store, this store will be an antique store. And I just think it's very cloudy now, which means you can show up at a store that says it's vintage and it might be more like a thrift store. It might have things very inexpensively, or it might be something that works on a donation basis or is a nonprofit. Or you could go to a vintage store or antique store and it could be selling $20,000 mid-century modern chairs. So I don't think that if you are shopping secondhand and looking either for bargains or trying to be more mindful of the environment, I think everything is eligible.
Virginia, something I think that would surprise a lot of people is the fact that you can go thrifting online these days.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, there are websites like Depop and Poshmark, and that's kind of thrifting in and of itself because you're buying someone else's gently used clothes. But even stores like Goodwill now have online marketplaces. Goodwill has shopgoodwill.com, where it functions very similarly to an auction site. So you can shop at Goodwill's in your area and bid on items, and then you have to go pick them up. So they're basically hand selecting these items. These are often things like maybe someone donated a Prada bag, or it might be, an unopened pair of sheets or something from the Pottery Barn, something, that's a little bit nicer maybe, or that they know is going to hold more value. So you can actually still find some really incredible things. And especially if you happen to be traveling in a new region, it's kind of fun to look on those stores' websites before you get there and see what kind of things that you might be able to find.
Yeah, and now everyone knows. Up next, tips on what to look for when shopping for secondhand clothing or furniture. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, and this is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
At checkbook.org, we have the answers to your consumer questions 24/7. That's checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that can help you with select local service providers, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on Checkbook to be completely independent and objective. Our advice is always free. Ratings of local services are available with a subscription. If you live in one of these 7 metro areas and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. Get your free 30-day subscription by going to checkbook.org/consumerpedia.
We're going thrifting with Virginia Shamley, author of Big Thrift Energy, and Checkbook's Jen Barger. Virginia, thrift stores have rack after rack of clothing, shirts and pants and dresses and swimsuits and kids' clothes, and on it goes. Is there anything we should focus on when we shop for secondhand clothing, or anything you wouldn't buy in this category?
I don't think that there's anything I wouldn't buy. I mean, I don't know. Maybe, I did go to a thrift store last week and they were selling used underwear. I don't know that would be on my list of things to buy. That might be a bridge too far. But what I always suggest people look at is, for men, the suits, and for women, the blazers. And I always tell men, just look for the words made in Italy. I mean, this is where some of the best suiting is and was made, certainly in the 80s and 90s. So even if you don't know anything about branding, just open that jacket pocket and see if it says made in Italy. And I think for women, the blazers is such a great place to look, because in the 80s and 90s, a lot of big name designers like Donna Karan and Givenchy and Valentino were making really beautiful blazers, because that was kind of the era of the power suit. Now, we don't really wear power suits necessarily the way we did then, but it's fun to take just the jacket off of that power suit and pair it with jeans. And I mean, where else can you find, a Valentino blazer for $10? I have found several, in fact. So yeah, those are my personal 2 favorite places to look. And the thing about thrifting is it tends to be so affordable that if something doesn't fit you exactly right, you can probably afford to take it to your tailor and just get it sort of nipped and tucked a little bit so that it fits you perfectly.
Jen, other than underwear, what would you look for at a thrift store?
especially in the winter or the fall. I like to run my hand down the sweater rack. And what I'm looking for there, I call it the touch test, is I'm looking for things that are really soft or things that are really woolly, because I think if you shop a lot or you're a sweater fan, you can generally tell, is something cashmere, is something mohair, and that's not a foolproof thing, but you can find lots of nice older sweaters that hopefully don't have a hole in them. And, you can often start just by kind of touching what's on the rack. It sounds weird when I say it that way, but.
Jen, I know that consignment stores typically sell high-end clothing that's in great shape. What do you think about the quality of the clothing you find at a Goodwill or Salvation Army thrift store?
It can be all over the map. I mean, you can find everything from, like Virginia was just saying, designer blazers and really high-end suits to, recently been a little disturbed at the vintage store I shop at. It's seeing a lot of fast fashion, like things that don't seem worth donating to me, but yet there they are. And so I'm not going to pay full price. I'm not going to pay thrift prices either. So that's what I wouldn't look for.
Virginia, I know you found some oddball clothing when you've done some shopping. Can you give us a couple of examples of what oddball clothing you found?
Oh gosh. Well, I have a really great cape. It's a floor-length cape, and I don't think it's oddball, but probably most people would, especially where I live in Florida. But I found it on the rack at a Goodwill. It was $10, and I opened it up, and the whole inside was lined in satin with CD printed everywhere inside because it's vintage Christian Dior. So that was a really good one for $10. Ooh. Oh, I have a really fabulous opera coat. So it's this big, floofy red monstrosity, $10 at a Salvation Army. It's by the brand Victor Costa, and it's usually retails for around $1,200. It's a vintage piece, so it's like a collector's piece. I'm never buying clothing to sell. I'm really buying it because I love clothing and I love vintage clothing. So certainly those are some of the oddball, I guess, clothing pieces that I found.
A number of years ago, I was looking for a pirate outfit. We have a big festival here in the Seattle area where there are a lot of pirates in the summertime. And there was a vintage clothing sale in Seaside, Oregon, where we were vacationing. And I was able to get a puffy shirt and a beautiful old-fashioned vest like a pirate would wear, and a big old man's purse kind of thing that a pirate might have. And got it for just a couple of dollars each because it was secondhand. And now I'm the most stunning pirate you've ever seen.
That's hysterical.
See, we learned a little bit about Herb today that we didn't need to know.
Yeah.
How can I find good deals on good quality furniture at a thrift store?
I think the biggest thing to do is check to see what material something is made out of. If you don't know anything about makers or labels, then just ask yourself, is this a material that would be expensive in a hardware store like marble or brass, for instance? These are materials that are expensive in their raw state. So it stands to reason that if a table is made out of marble or brass and it's $50 at the thrift store and it's in good condition, then that's a pretty good buy. Also, you can just look for maker's marks. If it's a chest of drawers, open those drawers and see if there are any labels inside. Oftentimes they'll stamp a label on the back. You can also just look for regions like North Carolina or Pennsylvania. These are both areas in the US that are known for their furniture. If it's an upholstered piece, you can also pick up the cushions or the pillows and check to see if there's a label underneath that. And like I said, you need to make sure it's in good condition. I think the sort of challenge of thrifting is that you get an adrenaline rush when you find something. And sometimes that can override your better judgment. And so you'll see a chair that's missing a leg and you'll think, this is the perfect project piece. And instead, you will have a garage full of project pieces because you will never get around to actually doing the project. I know this because I have done this many times.
Right.
So, you've got to make sure an item is functional.
Any thoughts you have, Jen?
If you're getting something that needs work, think about, are you really willing to either do the work or invest the money? I mean, that chair that we were talking about earlier was a project chair. To reupholster that chair, that was like a $250 reupholstery job. So it is essentially like I bought a chair for more money than $7. So you have to think about if you're going to put the work in or if you're dreaming, putting a projection onto a kind of busted up old chair.
So don't buy a poop chair unless you're willing to fix it.
Yeah, unless you're willing to de-poop it,
Well, there are other hidden costs too that I think people don't think about with furniture. And one of them is delivery.
Yes.
Because a lot of thrift stores are staffed by volunteers and many of them have rules because of liability concerns, they won't really help you even bring it to your car. They might bring it to the threshold of the store, for instance. So I have many times thrown my back out, thrown a friend's back out because I've said, I have to have this huge marble table. It's only $100. And then I wind up having to pay a delivery company to come pick it up because it's just way too heavy.
Virginia, do you take anything with you when you head to the thrift store?
I do. I always bring a tape measure. I have one on my keychain actually, because I want to make sure that the piece will fit either in my storage unit or in my home if I'm planning to put it there, and also in my car, because oftentimes I love art. That's one of the biggest things I buy. And sometimes it's so big, and I have a pretty large SUV, and sometimes it won't even fit in my SUV. So you've always got to make sure that you have a tape measure. I usually bring a blanket. I have a packing blanket in my car so that I can wrap furniture once I slide it in there and I don't ding it up. Often I'll have a couple little tote bags too, not just to bring with me shopping, but like if I find anything breakable, like a set of plates or something. Like I said, oftentimes these thrift stores are staffed by volunteers. They don't necessarily have the time to package everything up for you. So I try to make things as easy as possible. And these days, most thrift stores accept credit, but I have been in thrift stores where it is cash only, or where maybe their credit card machine broke down or something. So it's never a bad idea to bring some cash with you as well.
So are there any downsides to buying secondhand goods, and how can you improve your chances of having a successful shopping trip? We're going to talk about that next. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, and you're listening to Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Consumerpedia Fast Facts. According to Capital One Shopping, about 16 to 18% of Americans shop at thrift stores each year. Approximately 1/3 of clothing and apparel items purchased in the U.S. over the past year were secondhand. More than half of secondhand apparel shoppers in the U.S., 56%, are women. And based on reviews posted on Yelp, the best city for thrift shopping is Los Angeles, California.
Let's bring this thing home with some tips. Virginia, any strategies for upping your chances of success when you go to a thrift store?
I think my biggest strategy is doing research beforehand. And I know that doing homework sounds so boring, but I think it can actually be really fun to gather inspiration before you go to a thrift store. I try to spend a lot of time on the upscale, super high-end vintage marketplaces like Cherish and First Dibs. I'm biased because I sell on Cherish, but this is also a great place not just to shop, but to sort of educate yourself about makers and brands and also what's trending. I mean, if you go to their editors' picks pages or new arrivals, you can get a sense of what people are actually buying and what's actually in when it comes to vintage. And this way, when you go to a thrift store, you're not super, super overwhelmed, because I think a big challenge for people who are new to thrifting is you either go in and you buy nothing because you have everything kind of looks like junk to you. It's not styled. It's not placed in a way that makes it look inviting, or you run the risk of just buying way too much because everything's so inexpensive. And then you go home and you're like, why did I buy this? Oh, because it was $2, right? So I think doing a little bit of research beforehand, you're never going to find exactly what you found online before you went, but at least you can get an idea for styles and, just different objects. So when you are at a thrift store and you see some really interesting lamp, you might go, oh my gosh, wait, I saw that on First Dibs. That's, a $1,200 lamp.
Jen, any tips you have on finding the good deals or the hidden treasures?
Well, I think for hidden treasures, I kind of like to think small. And that means I have a few thrift stores, both here and in New York City, that are not the mega thrift stores. They're not the Goodwills. They're not the Salvation Armies. They're kind of little secret spots, and they often have better stuff. It's often less picked over.
So a couple questions based on me being the consumer man. First of all, are there any guarantees or warranties with the stuff you buy? I'm assuming no.
No. Yeah, no.
I mean, you know what? I bought a pair of lamps 2 days ago at a Goodwill, and they told me that if I got them home and they didn't work, that I would have, I think, 3 days to return them. And usually thrift stores will allow you to plug lamps in. Obviously, if there's no light bulb around, you won't know if it works necessarily. But sometimes they will have some sort of, return window for electronics. But certainly no. I mean, if you found a sweater and you got it home and it had a hole in it, I don't think you could
But the reason I asked is because they do sell electronics, and you might not have any idea whether that computer monitor or TV set or whatever really works or has problems until you get home and use it for a day or so.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to ask if that is something you're concerned about.
Yeah. Electronics, I mean, lamps, I have no problem with buying them at a thrift store. It's very easy also to rewire a lamp. But I think for electronics, you do have to plug it in while you're there. And it's a bit of a caveat emptor. But if the computer's at the thrift store, then if you get really lucky, maybe you're going to get a great new laptop for nothing. But more likely than not, if it's a great laptop in working condition, somebody will be selling it a different way. Electronics are one of the few areas where I might be a little careful at the thrift store.
And two things I would suggest listeners never buy at a thrift store are bike helmets and car seats, because you have no idea whether they've already been in an accident. And if they have been, they're not going to protect your child. So I would steer clear of that. And if you're buying any kind of kids' toys or kids' accessories or whatever, furniture, I would check to make sure that they hadn't been recalled, because you have no idea if someone has an old product they gave to the thrift store that was subject to a recall, could be dangerous for your child.
Yeah, don't buy a crib unless you really know that it's a safe crib.
All right, final thoughts. Do either of you have anything else to share that Herb didn't think of asking you?
I think it helps to know your brands. Virginia talked about some vintage brands, from the 80s that are particularly good, but even contemporary brands, like even if, say, you really like Madewell jeans and, you see them at a thrift store, they're not always made in the same factory, but that might give you an indication that that's something you might want to take to the dressing room. Even generally, just watching for brands that are maybe higher end or better quality can help you find better things at a thrift store.
Yeah. And I think clothing wise, you mentioned fast fashion earlier, and I think we think of fast fashion as mall brands, but certainly back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of those quote unquote fast fashion brands were made a lot more nicely than they are now. So sometimes when you'll even see Liz Claiborne or The Limited or Express, like Vintage Express, I know there's quite a market for that because they were actually using, silk. Not everything was a poly blend like it is today. I also think a piece of advice I would have is to thrift when you're on vacation, because I think this is such a good way to get acquainted with a place. And also you kind of learn about the history. I travel a lot for these home shows I do. And everywhere I go, I learn so much about that place. Greensboro, North Carolina is one of my favorite places to thrift for furniture because they're very near High Point, which is home to all of the big furniture showrooms. And so they'll be open to interior designers for a couple weeks out of the year. And then they'll close and they'll take all of that brand new designer furniture to the nearby thrift stores. So you go in the thrift store in Greensboro and it's like, oh my gosh, who knew? There's incredible, really incredible, like $10,000 couches and things like that at thrift and consignment stores there. Similarly, Detroit, there's a lot of mid-century modern stuff, and Palm Beach, Florida, there's a lot of pieces from the 1960s. So it's kind of fun to get acquainted with a place via its thrift stores.
Not everyone is looking for vintage stuff. Some people go to get their kids' school clothes because they just have to stretch their budget. So I want to make clear that everything you want to get at a thrift store isn't vintage furniture, vintage clothing. Some of it is just a great way kids grow up real quickly and grow out of their clothes to sort of clothe the family if you need to stretch the budget.
Oh, absolutely. And oftentimes these thrift stores will have discount days. So it's worth it to sort of do research in your area. I know Goodwill locally in Northeast Florida will have, half off blue tags, which might be kids' clothes, for instance, on Mondays. So if there is something specific you're looking for and you're not really looking for a designer name or a vintage brand or something like that, I would definitely make a point to go on those discount days so that you can really, really get a good bang for your buck.
And with that, we've come to the end. Want to thank our guests, Jen Barger, Director of Content at Checkbook. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. It was really fun.
And Virginia Shamley. She's author of Big Thrift Energy. Her popular newsletter is called What's Left. How do people find you on the web, Virginia?
You can find me at vshamley.substack.com or on Instagram at vshamley.
And that's CHAMLEE. Thank you, Virginia.
Thanks for having me.
Before we go, here are a few more Consumerpedia podcasts that deal with saving money. Number 84, Free Perks You Didn't Know You Had. Number 78, Clothing Rental Subscriptions. Number 49, Shop Like a Pro. And number 26, Sale Prices Are Rarely Deals. You might want to check them out. We also hope you'll rate this episode and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And that's it for now. Remember, we release new episodes every other Thursday. Here's another way you can support this show. Follow us at Consumerpedia on Facebook and Instagram, at consumerpedia.org on Blue Sky, and at MyConsumerpedia on X. You'll find me at consumerman.com. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, always looking out for you. Until next time, be smart and shop wisely.
Consumerpedia is a public service of checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that helps you save money and make smarter choices. You can count on Checkbook to help you find the best services and avoid the worst, with local ratings that are accurate and unbiased. If you live in or around these 7 cities and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Minneapolis-St. Paul, Seattle, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. To get your free 30-day subscription, go to checkbook.org/consumerpedia. Consumerpedia, empowering consumers to save money and make smarter choices.